The 1007 eruption of Mount Vesuvius stands as one of the most significant volcanic events in medieval Italy. Though less famous than its catastrophic 79 CE predecessor, this explosive chapter in Vesuvius's long history came during a particularly active period, as the mountain reminded the medieval world of its fierce temperament. The volcano, which dominates the Bay of Naples with its imposing presence, had been showing signs of unrest in the years leading up to 1007. This eruption was part of a series of significant volcanic activities that marked the early medieval period, occurring between other recorded eruptions in 991 and 1037. Living in Vesuvius's shadow has always been a double-edged sword for the local population. The fertile volcanic soil provided abundant agricultural opportunities, but there was always the constant threat of an eruption. During the 1007 event, the communities around Naples faced not just the immediate danger of lava flows, but also the challenges of ash falls that could easily destroy crops and disrupt daily life. What makes this eruption particularly intriguing is its timing during a period of significant social and political change in medieval Italy. The region was experiencing shifts in power dynamics between various political entities, and natural disasters like this eruption often had far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate physical damage. While not well documented as some of the later eruptions, the 1007 event serves as an important marker in understanding Vesuvius's historical activity patterns. Today, this medieval eruption helps volcanologists better understand Vesuvius's behavior patterns, contributing to our knowledge of how this still active volcano might behave in the future. On New Year's Day in 1009, the medieval world witnessed a shocking act of iconoclasm. Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim bi-Amar Allah ordered the destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, a sacred site believing to mark where Jesus was crucified and resurrected. Built in the 4th century under Constantine and Helena, the church had long served as a spiritual beacon for Christians. Al-Hakim's decree was not merely a political maneuver, but a deliberate assault on Christian faith. His orders led to the systematic demolition of the holy structure. Workmen dismantled domes, shattered walls, and eradicated relics, leaving ruins that symbolized the caliph's uncompromising ideals. Contemporary chroniclers like Yahya ibn Sa'id recorded grim details describing how revered icons and altars were reduced to ash. The massacre of these hallowed sites sent outrage and despair across Europe, igniting calls for vengeance. The brutal act heightened tensions between the Islamic and Christian worlds, eventually fueling the passion behind crusades. In its aftermath, the destruction not only severed a vital link in Christian heritage, but also spurred debates over religious tolerance and authority. Although later rulers enabled the church's partial reconstruction, its original splendor was forever ruined, leaving something that was likely hailed as one of the wonders of the world forever gone, only leaving behind a sliver of a once great Christian structure. News of the catastrophe spread swiftly throughout the world, provoking widespread lament and inciting fierce calls for retribution. The event was cited by later crusaders as evidence of a dangerous, volatile regime whose actions demanded a decisive and holy response. Some consider this the moment in history, the moment the crusaders' ideology was born. Edmund Ironside, a warrior king whose reign lasted just 7 intense months, met his end in circumstances that would make the writers of Game of Thrones envious. On November 30th, 1016, after a year of relentless battles against the Danish invasion, Edmund met his fate in circumstances that still spark debate among historians. Edmund earned his nickname Ironside through sheer tenacity, fighting 5 major battles against Canute the Great and his Danish forces in 1016. After his father Athred's death, Edmund had taken the throne during one of England's most turbulent periods, demonstrating remarkable military prowess and leadership. The climax came at the Battle of Assendun, where despite Edmund's valiant efforts, Canute's forces prevailed. This led to the remarkable agreement, the Treaty of Olney, where these two fierce rivals agreed to divide England between them. Edmund would rule Wessex, while Canute took control of Mercia and Northumbria. But fate had other plans for both leaders. Just weeks after this historic agreement, Edmund had died under mysterious circumstances in Oxford or London. The most infamous account suggests that he was assassinated in a rather undignified manner, struck from below with a sword while attending to his business. Some fingers had pointed at the notorious Adric Streona, a nobleman known for his political opportunism, though other sources suggest Edmund might have succumbed to wounds from his most recent battles. Edmund's death provided convenient for Canute, who swiftly became sole ruler of England. beginning the Danish dynasty. The timing was so perfect that it's fueled centuries of speculation about whether this was a carefully orchestrated political assassination or simply unfortunate timing. This medieval mystery marked the end of an era, transforming England's political landscape and paving the way for Canute's powerful North Sea empire. The death of Emperor Romanos III Agreus reads like a Byzantine murder mystery, complete with Palestrama, a younger lover, and a suspicious drowning that historians still speculate about. On April 11th, 1034, the 65-year-old emperor was discovered face down in the palace baths. The prime suspect? None other than his own wife, Empress Zoe, who at the time had grown increasingly estranged from her aging husband. Romanos had been forced to divorce his first wife and marry Zoe at the command of her father, Emperor Constantine VIII. During his reign, Romanos had proven to be well-meaning, but ultimately ineffective. He'd managed to disrupt the empire's entire tax system and led a notably disastrous military campaign against Aleppo. Adding to the intrigue, his relationship with Zoe had deteriorated significantly, particularly after he began limiting her expenses. A story that sounds all too familiar by today's standards. The plot thickens when we consider that Zoe had already found comfort in the arms of a much younger man, Michael IV, who would suspiciously enough become the next emperor immediately following Romanos' death. Contemporary accounts suggest two possible methods of murder, either poisoning or drowning, with some sources indicating Zoe may have ordered servants to hold the emperor underwater until he stopped breathing. What makes this case particularly fascinating is that despite the obvious suspects and motives, no one was ever formally accused or punished for the emperor's death. The swift succession of Michael IV and his immediate marriage to Zoe only fueled speculation about the true nature of Romanos' demise. This lovers' quarrel, although a mystery, is a tale clearly as old as time. A spoiled gold-digging wife murders her marginally older husband in order to steal his wealth and power. Though it does seem like the cherry on top is the fact that Romano truly just wasn't liked by people, so much so that he may have been drowned to death by multiple of his own servants. And to top it off, the most obvious suspect was then granted the title of Byzantine Emperor. July 4th, 1054, Chinese astronomers were scratching their heads as they witnessed something extraordinary. A star so bright that it was visible in broad daylight. This bright light wasn't just any light show, as SN 1054, or Supernova 1054, one of history's most spectacular supernovas, whose remnants would become the famous Crab Nebula. For 23 days, this cosmic spectacle dominated the daytime sky, and for nearly 2 years it continued to dazzle stargazers at night. The Chinese called it a guest star, though it wouldn't remain there for long. In reality, this guest star was a stellar explosion visible from Earth, despite being a mind-boggling 6,500 light-years away. What makes this event particularly fascinating is that it left behind evidence across cultures. While Chinese astronomers meticulously documented their observations, Native American pictographs near New Mexico's Penasco Blanco site appear to depict the same phenomena. Some scholars suggest that pyramids at Cahokia might have been built in response to this celestial show. Modern science has revealed that this wasn't just any ordinary stellar explosion. Recent studies suggest that it might have been an extremely rare type of stellar death called an electron capture supernova. Think of it as a cosmic middle ground, not quite as massive as the typical supergiants that explode, but more dramatic than smaller stars that simply fade away. Today, what remains is the Crab Nebula, a rapidly expanding cloud of gas and dust that continues to puzzle and amaze astronomers. At its heart pulses a neutron star spinning 30 times per second, essentially functioning as some kind of space lighthouse. The Great Schism of 1054 remains one of history's most transformative and dramatic moments in the history of Christianity. In that moment, the centuries-old bond between the East and the West was irrevocably severed, giving birth to the distinct traditions of the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. Sparked by deep-rooted disputes over theological doctrines, practices, and the inclusion of the Filioque clause in the Nicene Creed, meaning the Roman Church thought the Holy Spirit to be an extension of both the Father and the Son, rather than simply just the Father, the schism was fueled by differences that reached beyond mere ritual. In the West, the Roman Church, armed with the legacy of ancient Rome and strong centralized authority, vested in the Pope, who embraced a unified structure and a clear line of command. In contrast, the Eastern communities valued vastly different approaches, emphasizing the shared wisdom of their bishops and embracing century-old traditions grounded in mysticism. These diverging philosophies were exacerbated by cultural, linguistic, and political tensions that had long simmered beneath the surface. The mutual excommunications that followed were not only symbolic gestures, but also the ultimate seal on a profound division. The Great Schism stands as a testament to how ideas, identities, and institutional power can fracture even the deepest bonds of unity. The schism was essentially something of a Cold War between the two respective factions of the church and separated the church for over 1,000 years, meaning the rift that was created is still in place to this day. In 1066, a seismic shift swept across England as the Norman conquest unfurled a dramatic transformation. Duke William of Normandy, later crowned William the Conqueror, launched an invasion to claim a disputed throne. With military innovation and resolute determination, his well-prepared force crossed the treacherous channel to face King Harold Godwinson's army in the fields of Hastings. There, as the determined Anglo-Saxon warriors met the disciplined Norman cavalry head-on, they were defeated as Harold's forces were gradually overwhelmed through superior tactics and unyielding resolve. Harold's death on the battlefield marked a turning point, bringing about the collapse of an old order. William's victory had not only redefined power, but reshaped society, establishing feudal systems that redistributed lands among royal nobles. These estates, fortified by the construction of stone castles, reinforced the new hierarchy while leaving an architectural legacy that endures. The combination of Norman French with the vernacular Anglo-Saxon paved the way for modern English language, bringing together a cultural tapestry that would resonate throughout the ages. The meticulous record-keeping of the Domesday Book, more on that later, further solidified the transformation, capturing the reshaped land and social order. The Norman conquest remains as an enduring symbol of how a single determined leader can rewrite the destiny of an entire nation. The conquest ignited a cascade of reforms and exchanges, reshaping governance and culture, while nurturing creativity and intellect for generations, with its legacy shaping the future of Britain. In 1075, a dramatic clash between sword and scripture would begin to reshape the medieval world. The investiture controversy erupted in 1075 when Pope Gregory VII threw down the gauntlet with his declaration Dictatus Papae, essentially telling Europe's monarchs to keep their royal hands off church appointments. At its heart, this was a battle over who got to hand out the fancy hats and rings to bishops, the secular rulers who'd been doing it for centuries, or the Pope who claimed exclusive spiritual authority. King Henry IV of Germany, not one to back down, found himself at the center of this theological tug-of-war. The conflict exploded when Henry, young and headstrong, continued appointing bishops as his predecessors had done. Gregory responded by threatening excommunication, medieval Europe's equivalent of a spiritual nuclear option. Henry, showing remarkable audacity, fired back by attempting to depose the Pope, calling him a false monk, a poor move from the young kid. Gregory excommunicated Henry, effectively telling all Christians that they could ignore the king. Henry's nobles, sensing weakness, began to rebel. The king was forced to make his famous walk to Canossa in 1077, standing barefoot in the snow for 3 days to beg the Pope's forgiveness. This controversy raged for decades, spawning excommunications, anti-popes, and enough political intrigue for a 10-part series of its own. Over 3 decades later, it finally ended with the Concordat of Worms in 1122, a compromise that let the church control spiritual investiture while monarchs retained influence over temporal matters. This wasn't just about ceremonial jewelry, it fundamentally altered the balance between religious and secular power in medieval Europe, setting precedents that would influence church-state relations for centuries to come. To get back to the Domesday Book, in 1086, a massive inventory was ordered by William the Conqueror, one of which was so thorough and final in its judgments, the English nicknamed it after Doomsday itself. The Domesday Book of 1086 was essentially William's way of saying, "Let me see exactly what I've conquered, down to the last cow or pig." This wasn't your average record-keeping exercise. William sent his commissioners, essentially medieval auditors, across England, armed with a standardized questionnaire that would make modern bureaucrats proud. They asked just about everything. Who owns what land? How many plows, sheep, mills, even the eels in the local streams weren't safe from their inquiries. The book records that England had about 13,000 places, 50,000 knights and peasants, and enough pigs to make bacon replace tea as a national pastime. Commissioners knocked on the doors from Yorkshire to Cornwall, compiling data that would put the US Census to shame. What makes the Domesday Book truly remarkable wasn't just its scope, it was its purpose. This wasn't merely about counting sheep, it was about power, control, and taxes. William wanted to know exactly what his new kingdom was worth and who owed what to whom. The name Doomsday stuck because, like the Last Judgment, its decisions were final and inescapable. The book itself, written in Latin on parchment, consists of 2 volumes, Great Doomsday and Little Doomsday, which, despite its name, contains more detailed information about Essex, Norfolk, and Suffolk. Today it sits in the National Archives in London, a testament to medieval efficiency and royal determination. This massive undertaking gives us an unprecedented snapshot of medieval English life, from the great lords down to the humble peasants, as it's the closest thing we have to Google Earth for 11th century England, of course minus the satellite imagery. The People's Crusade of 1096, led by the captivating preacher Peter the Hermit and his sidekick Walter Sans Arvois, literally Walter the Penniless, was the unofficial prelude to the First Crusade. The People's Crusade was a storm of passionate devotion mixed with proportionate disorganization. After Pope Urban II's rousing call for crusade, Peter's fiery sermons ignited such enthusiasm that roughly 40,000 common folk couldn't wait for the official campaign. This journey quickly devolved into chaos before even leaving Europe. Some crusaders decided to quote-unquote practice their holy war by attacking Jewish communities in the Rhineland. Their desperate need for supplies led to looting and clashes with local populations. When they finally reached Constantinople, Emperor Alexios I quickly ferried them across the Bosporus, hoping to avoid further chaos in his capital. Despite warnings to wait for the main Crusader armies, our enthusiastic but undisciplined band had pushed into Turkish territory. The finale was tragically predictable. The professional Turkish army thoroughly demolished the peasant forces. Peter the Hermit had conveniently left for Constantinople to gather supplies. The People's Crusade ended in a near-complete destruction, with only a handful of survivors. This ill-fated expedition serves as a stark reminder that enthusiasm alone doesn't win wars. It would be the organized armies of the First Crusade arriving months later that would actually reach Jerusalem, which we will discuss next. Serving as the official starting point of the Crusades, Pope Urban II stands before a crowd in 1095, delivering a speech so electrifying it launches one of history's most ambitious military campaigns. The First Crusade bursts onto the medieval stage like a fever dream of religious fervor and political ambition, drawing thousands of Europeans into an unprecedented journey towards Jerusalem. What began as a Byzantine emperor's plea for military aid transformed into a full-blown holy war. Then came the main event, the Prince's Crusade. This wasn't just your average medieval road trip, with heavy hitters like Godfrey of Bouillon and Bohemond of Taranto leading massive armies eastward. Their forces estimated at 130,000 to 160,000 strong, including both knights and infantry. The Crusaders racked up impressive victories. They captured Nicaea, triumphed at Antioch after a siege that would make modern military planners wince, and finally reached Jerusalem in 1099. The Holy City's capture was a brutal affair that ended in a bloodbath, marking both the Crusade's greatest triumph and its darkest hour. This campaign's success led to the establishment of 4 Crusader states: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Tripoli. These European-style feudal kingdoms in the Holy Land would persist for nearly 2 centuries, creating a blend of Eastern and Western cultures. The First Crusade wasn't just a military campaign, it was a cultural turning point in medieval society, leaving lasting impacts on everything from European politics to Middle Eastern geography. It set the stage for centuries of religious warfare and cross-cultural exchange that would fundamentally alter the medieval world. In June 1098, the First Crusaders were trapped in Antioch, starving and demoralized. This is when a particular character named Peter Bartholomew, a different Peter than Peter the Hermit, of course, steps forward with an extraordinary claim. This peasant, known for being a drunk, announces that St. Andrew had appeared to him in visions, revealing the location of the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side on the cross. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic, as the Crusaders were in dire straits, besieged by a massive Turkish Arab force, with food running scarce and morale plummeting. While the Bishop of Les Poix raised an eyebrow, Count Raymond of Provence was intrigued enough to authorize a dig in St. Peter's Cathedral. After initial digging yielded nothing, Peter himself, wearing only a shirt, jumped into the trench and, lo and behold, emerged triumphantly with an iron spearhead. The discovery boosted the morale of the desperate Crusaders. The effect was transformative on June 28th, following another vision from St. Andrew. The reinvigorated Crusaders stormed out of Antioch, carrying the Holy Lance. They achieved what seemed to be impossible: a decisive victory despite their weakened state. Some even claimed to see celestial warriors on white horses led by St. George himself, joining in on the fun. Whether Peter somehow staged the discovery or genuinely possessed the divine gift, the lance's authenticity would later be questioned, leading to heated disputes among the Crusaders. But in that crucial moment at Antioch, when hope was desperately needed, this relic, authentic or not, provided the spiritual boost that turned the tide of the battle and kept the will of the First Crusade alive and burning with passion. If you like this video, feel free to check out our others, and feel free to leave future video ideas down in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you can be notified every time we upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.